Today, we're diving into something close to my heart, and maybe yours too. It's about grief, not the kind that fades after a few months or years, but the kind that lingers, sometimes for decades. If you're still grieving after 30 years, or even longer, this video is for you. And if you've ever felt that quiet pressure to move on, I'm here to tell you why I refuse to, and why you shouldn't feel you have to either. Society tells us to move on after loss, but what if I told you that holding on to grief can be a powerful act of love? That it's not about being stuck, it's about honoring the people who shaped our lives. Grief doesn't come with an expiration date, and neither does love. We live in a world that loves to rush everything: healing, happiness, even grief. People expect us to get over our losses after a certain amount of time, a year, maybe two, and then you're supposed to be fine. But for many of us, especially as we grow older, grief doesn't follow that script. It's not a phase we pass through. It's part of who we are. And I'm here to say that's okay. More than okay. It's a sign of how deeply we've loved. Today, I'm sharing why I've chosen to embrace my grief, even after 30 years, and why you might feel the same way too. Let me take you back 30 years. I lost my husband, John, after 40 years of marriage. He was my rock, my best friend, my partner in every sense of the word. When he passed, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. The world kept spinning, but I couldn't. At first, I tried to keep up. I'd smile at family dinners, nod when people told me, "Time heals all wounds." But inside, I was still in that hospital room, holding his hand, wishing for one more minute. Now, 30 years later, that ache is still there. On our anniversary, I set a place for him at the table, just a quiet little ritual. On his birthday, I walk to his favorite park and sit on the bench where we used to talk for hours. Some might say I'm clinging to the past, but I don't see it that way. I'm not stuck. I'm choosing to live with his memory. Because letting go of that grief would feel like letting go of him, and I can't do that. I won't. I know so many of you get this. Maybe you've lost a spouse, a sibling, a child, or a lifelong friend. And maybe, like me, you still feel them with you every day. That's not a flaw. It's a gift. It's love that refuses to fade. So why do I refuse to move on? Because moving on sounds like leaving John behind, like pretending our life together doesn't matter anymore. But it does. Grief isn't a problem to solve or a hurdle to jump over. It's a thread woven into my life, a reminder of the love we shared, the laughter, the quiet moments that made me who I am. Society loves to put a timeline on grief. After a while, you start hearing it. It's been so long. Shouldn't you be over it by now? But who made that rule? Who decided that love, and the grief that comes with it, has a cut-off date? The reality is, grief lasts as long as love does. And for many of us, that's a lifetime. There's this beautiful idea from Dr. Lois Tonkin, a grief expert. She said grief doesn't shrink over time. Our lives grow around it. We add new joys, new memories. But that grief stays, part of the fabric of who we are. And I think that's something worth holding on to, not something to hide. If you're watching this and you've been grieving for years, maybe decades, I need you to hear this. You're not alone, and you're not broken. There's no right way to grieve, no clock ticking down to when you're supposed to be done. Your grief is valid, and it's okay to feel it as deeply today as you did back then. For those of us who've lived long lives, grief can feel even more layered. We've collected so many memories, so many people we've loved and lost. As we age, we might find ourselves thinking about them more, missing them more. That's not a sign you're failing. It's a sign you've lived and loved fully. It's normal, and it's human. You don't have to move on to have a good life. You can carry your grief and still find joy, still laugh, still love the people around you. It's not one or the other. It's both, together, making up the beautiful, messy whole of who you are. Now, I want to share a few things that have helped me live with my grief, and might help you too. These aren't about fixing anything. They're about honoring your loved one while honoring yourself. First, try creating small rituals. For me, it's lighting a candle for John on his birthday or sitting in his favorite spot. It's a way to keep him close, to mark those moments that still matter. Second, find people who get it. Maybe it's a support group at the community centre, an online forum, or just a friend who listens. Sharing your story can lighten the load, not because it goes away, but because you're not carrying it alone. Third, let yourself feel it. When those waves of grief hit, maybe on a holiday or out of nowhere, don't push them down. Cry if you need to. Remember if you want to. Those emotions are part of the love. Fourth, weave their memory into your days. Wear their old scarf. Plant their favourite roses. Cook that recipe they loved. It's a quiet way to keep them with you. And finally, be kind to yourself. Grief takes energy, especially as we get older. Rest when you're tired. Skip the things that feel too heavy, and give yourself the grace you deserve. You've carried so much. Don't forget to care for you. I'd love to hear from you now. If you're still grieving after all these years, or if you've found your own ways to honour someone you've lost, drop your story in the comments below. Let's make this a place where we lift each other up, where no one feels alone in their grief. And if this video spoke to you, please hit that subscribe button. We're building a little community here for elders, by elders, and I'd love for you to join us. Your grief is valid, your love is forever, and you don't have to move on to live a life that matters. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.